Hello, filmmakers. Welcome to this early morning edition of Very Complicated Discussions. Actually, that's not true. We're going to try to break down film production insurance in a way that makes more sense, makes you understand why you need it, how to get it. What does production insurance cover? What does workers' compensation cover? How much should someone expect to pay each year for insurance? How do people get their feature films covered? What is E&O? What is a waiver subrogation? Blah, 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 blah. We're going to go on and do it all. And we have got the perfect person here. I've got Alan Schlaifer, who is my guy. He is my guy who I email regularly. I'm surprised he said yes to do this because I'm surprised he doesn't hate me yet. Alan, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So we're going to dive right in. Those of you watching, please put your comments in the box so we can, or your questions in the box in the comment section, and we will get to all of them. But let's start off with the basics. What is production insurance exactly?
Well, production insurance covers production companies. Basically, there's a few different sections of production insurance. One is your general liability, your auto liability. Then you have your production package, and usually workers' comp goes along with that. Now, depending on the situation or requirements, there may be additional coverages involved.
So when we talk about workers' comp, I just want to touch on it because it's not something you have to have when you're doing production insurance. I obviously have it on mine.
You're supposed to.
Yes. Would you recommend? Okay, here's my question, I guess. So when you do a payroll company, they usually carry workers' comp. But I go with you. I have my workers' comp built into my policy. Do you have a reason you would say one or the other? Does it matter?
I don't know what the costs of payroll companies are, but usually when you're hiring a payroll company, they add, here's your payroll. This is our markup. You also have to pay for, fringe things, payroll tax, all the taxes involved, yada, yada, yada. By the time you're done, it can be pretty expensive. I do recommend to a lot of people to go through the State Fund of California, which is also, depending who the carrier is, sometimes it makes a big difference because certain carriers have very, very high workers' comp rates. And I always say, oh, no, don't get your workers' comp through me on this one because you're going to be paying through the nose. So if you can, I've always been told that the State Fund of California takes a long time to get through. So I would always leave yourself at least like 2-3 weeks to get in touch with them. But sometimes they come through a lot quicker than that. Yeah.
The State Fund of California. So if someone Googles that, they'll come up with how to apply.
Yeah. And they will basically cover. They have to cover you as the State Fund of California.
Wow, that's great.
And I think what I've been told by my clients is that the rates are very, very, very reasonable.
I'm going to look that up. I also like that whenever, if you work with Alan, he's really good about trying to find you the best coverage for your needs. So like my workers' comp is not exactly the same as potentially the overall carrier. Camcol has a great question on the workers' comp. Most workers' comp policies won't cover contractors or volunteers or those who are paid in kind and not in cash. Would love to hear your thoughts on how to deal with this. And she's on the East Coast, not California. I don't know that matters. I think that generally the same everywhere.
Well, the film business is notorious for hiring independent contractors and has been that way for a long time. With the AB5 rule, which is the new law they're working on. I'm not sure the status of it right now, but a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, they're not cracking down as much on the production community.
But does workers' comp usually cover? So if I have someone on set who's a contractor, not an employee, my workers' comp will cover them or not usually?
Yeah, they will cover independent contractors out here. And in my experience, if they're on payroll, they're going through a payroll company.
Right.
Right.
Usually I think with the low budget, contractors tend to be, we're paying them through Venmo, or if you have volunteers, maybe you're giving them a gas stipend. And I guess I can get the concern Camcol Films is asking about, where it's like, are those people going to be covered if something terrible were to happen?
Yeah. Well,
obviously you always have to ask your particular company. I would always say, you want to make sure you ask them. But in your experience, Alan, what have you found?
Yeah, well, basically the rule is anyone working under your direction, whether they're W-2 or independent contractors, they are working under your direction. So by law, they are covered by workers' comp.
Great. Camcol, also comment if you've had experiences where you were told you weren't covered. We can go into that as well. Alexandra Jimenez, hello, Alex, wants to know, how does production insurance work when abroad? I think that's a great question. So I'm assuming she means like, I work in California. I've gotten my production insurance from you, but I decide I'm going to go make a short film in France. Am I still covered?
Parts of you are. Usually your inland marine coverage, which is all property related coverages, that usually is a worldwide coverage. So if you're renting equipment, that is covered going abroad, but you will usually need to have a foreign liability policy.
Okay.
And when you write a foreign liability policy, they will give you the opportunity to get what they call employer's liability or employer's responsibility, which is in essence their version of workers' comp.
Okay. Alexandra, if that doesn't answer your question fully, please put more in the comments and we'll dig in deeper. David has a similar question, but statewide. I have a multi-state travel series coming up with my workers' comp cover. Will my workers' comp cover the crew I hire in various states we travel to, or do I need a short-term policy for each state we go to?
That is a good question. Usually they will do it by location, and you will have to declare what states you're going to. I don't see them changing the workers' comp rates per state, but each state has a different workers' comp rate. So usually it's where your location is, that's what they base it on. And then, okay, you're traveling now, go do what you got to do.
So in my case, where I have my production insurance, workers' comp, and then I decide I'm going to go shoot a short film in, St. Louis.
Yeah.
I need to get in touch with my insurance company. I need to get in touch with you and say, I'm going to St. Louis, and make sure we're covered.
It depends. It depends how you're doing it. If you're doing a short-term policy, see, you have an annual DICE policy.
Right.
So you're covered. You can go anywhere you want, and you're covered.
Okay.
Within the United States, you're fine. But if you're getting a short-term policy, basically whatever is on the application, and when I write it, sometimes I get into this quandary. They'll say, "Oh yeah, we're out of Los Angeles," and then they'll say, "Oh, but we're shooting in, let's say, Tennessee or something like that." And then when I go to the workers' comp section of the application online, I type in Tennessee, and they say, "What is the address?" Because then they want to base their work comp rates on that state where they're working. Then, if I don't have a license in Tennessee, I'll have to make that location the location of the film, or the quote unquote address of the insured. It's very convoluted.
Yeah. I'm glad that's what you do and not what I have to do. I just
and then
hey, I'm going here, fix it.
Yeah, and if I don't have a license, I go get a license for that state. But
That's
I have
awesome.
licensed in several states now.
So on that, I love the switch in a little bit worry, because you mentioned, my term is an annual versus people buying short term. In
Mhm.
my experience, short term actually costs the same or more than my annual policy. So for
It can.
let's not talking feature films or long, but just short projects, short videos.
Right.
Would you recommend someone just get the annual policy?
I think it depends on how much they have on their schedule. I mean, if you're doing, I would say 3 to 4 projects, I would get an annual policy, because each short term could be like 2,500, and then if you add workers' comp, it could be more expensive as well. And each time you do a short term workers' comp, you're charged as a minimum premium workers' comp policy, which is about $1,000, which is the same as an annual minimum premium on a policy.
Yeah, that's why I've been doing the annual for a while. I would say for those of you who haven't done an annual, and you're wondering how much it costs, in my case, it's been around $5,000 to $6,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's a minimum premium policy, which is about $200,000 gross production cost.
And I've had no trouble. We've shot at SoFi Stadium or in the news, the YouTube theater, like places that have said they want like $5 million coverage, and we've been fine with our $1 million or $2 million, depending on what we have. Actually, since we're on that, I want to kind of go through a certificate of insurance
Mm-hmm.
to kind of explain to people what this might look like. Get rid of this little guy here. Oh, doing my own tech. Fun times. Okay. So starting at the top, obviously, when someone's insured, your vendor's name and address goes there. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's get into what all these kind of categories mean.
Mm-hmm.
So first thing up is commercial general liability.
Yep.
And it looks like I have all these random numbers, million, 100,000. Can you kind of just give us what is the commercial general liability? What does that cover? So everybody understands.
Yeah, basically that is injury or damage to a third party. And people confuse general liability with workers' comp. Well, I want to protect the people that are working on my set. Isn't that general liability? No. That's in case someone walks into your set, where you're shooting. I like to use the Three Stooges as an example. And they're carrying a ladder. They turn around. They knock the old lady down the subway stairs. Yeah, that would be bad, and that would be a general liability.
So when it says each occurrence 1 million, so that means if I'm on a project, it would up to $1 million will be covered for that project.
Yeah, each claim. So
Okay.
Each occurrence is a claim, basically.
Okay.
So, and your aggregate is 2. So you can have up to $1 million claims.
Got that. And he's talking about the general aggregate here, which you'll see here, guys. And then when it says, so medical expenses, personal injury, again, this is not the workers' comp. This is someone gets hit with the light, which we've had things scary that happen, like a lamp falls. We've had it fall in a car. Luckily, it didn't hit people. But if it hit the person, that's where this comes into play. Yeah. Does this also cover, is general liability also your location? If there's a hole gets put in the wall, if a table gets broken?
Now, the problem with the production insurance is where you see damage to rented premises, there's a 7-day exclusion. So if you are at a location less than 7 days within the world of production insurance, that is excluded under this.
I didn't even know that. That's scary.
That's why we have third-party property damage coverage in your DICE portion of the policy.
If we move down, we'll see that here we've got third-party property damage at $1 million. And also notice, guys, the deductibles. Deductibles are not cheap when it comes to this. So I always tell everybody, like, it's not even worth filing a claim if your camera's $2,500, just go get the new camera yourself, because you're going to pay that in a deductible anyway. Let's go back up. So automobile liability, I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
And that is also, just to explain auto liability versus auto physical damage. Auto liability is a third party claim. So you have a PA driving, gets into an accident and hits a guy's car. It'll pay for the other guy's car, not the PA's car, and make sure the other guy is
Interesting.
Taken care of for any injury or damage.
So what about, does this cover, say, grip trucks? If the grip truck got damaged?
Yeah, that would be a rented or hired auto.
Okay, great. And then you can see here that these are all these things that are checked. So when you guys are getting your insurance, make sure you know what you need. I kind of just trust Alan. I'm like, you know what I need. Give me what I need. And then if something comes up, we add on as we need to. Obviously, if workers' comp is checked, for me, it's a yes. You don't have to do workers' comp this, like we talked about.
Well, that means you're excluded from the policy as the owner.
Oh, yes. I can't claim workers' comp for myself. Right. And I always tell people, like, when my other producers, when we're producing, I'm like, y'all, none of y'all count. Sorry. Like, just don't get hurt. Cause I feel like this workers' comp is covering the people who are, doing the labor and, our actors. We also have, it looks like I have a special thing here for prop sets and wardrobe. Yep. And we probably use more certs for props and wardrobe than anything else besides gear. And it's crazy because the deductible's $2,000 and our rental fees are never that much. But I guess in the great scheme of things, it's always better to have the coverage and the events that your entire, your whole wardrobe goes up in flames.
It's standard in a DICE policy to cover the miscellaneous rented equipment, extra expense, prop sets, wardrobe, third-party property damage, and faulty stock and negative coverage. Those are like the 5 main tenets of a production DICE policy.
Great. So if anybody has any questions on that stuff, by all means, put them in the box. And I love that Rick asked this question because it's my next. I wanted to ask this too. Regarding a doc feature or features in general, is our insurance protect against getting sued by the subject of our doc? And I think in general, let's talk about feature film production insurance, because like my DICE policy doesn't cover features. It only covers short projects.
Correct.
So I go to you, I would need to get a feature film. I'd get a special insurance for my feature. Let's talk about that.
Well, documentaries, quote unquote, are supposed to be covered under a DICE policy, since the D in DICE stands for documentaries. So DICE stands for documentaries, industrials, commercials, and educational, but really means multiple short form projects within a year, usually with a production schedule of 90 days or less, which there's lots of features you could do for under 90 days production schedule, but they exclude feature films most of the time. There is one carrier that will allow low budget features on their DICE policy form. So that is a possibility as well.
So when he asked about specifically from getting to make sure he's protected against getting sued from subject docs, I feel like that's more of a entertainment lawyer contract, or like a release that has that in there. So that wouldn't really be an insurance thing, would it?
No, it would be an insurance thing, because when you go to distribution, usually the distributor will require that you get E&O insurance. And the E&O insurance is what covers you from being sued from the content of your project. So, and the E&O covers you against unlicensed things, IP issues. Basically,
for anybody who doesn't know, E&O is errors and omissions.
Yeah, unauthorized use, basically.
So if you have a Coke product that you didn't get cleared or whatever, it can cover anything as small as that to, as I guess, can't be sued by a subject of a doc, which I didn't know. That's great.
Yeah, and then your media attorney will usually go over the clearance grid, or you'll have a clearance company go over the clearance, and then they'll request usually a title report, which you can get from like Clearance House or something like that. And then they may require a letter from your attorney. If you're using media clips, they would want a letter that basically justifies the fair use clause. And if there's the fair use, then that usually there's a fair use endorsement on the policy as well.
So next thing up is, well, I guess it's still in the feature films, like getting feature films covered. What is the average cost of insurance for a low budget feature film?
It depends on the budget.
Let's say if the budget's like $250,000.
Yeah, you could probably get away with $7,000-ish for the production insurance.
It's so much money. Insurance is so expensive.
Yeah, I would figure, and it depends. You can kind of, people call me, they say, how much is insurance? I want to say, how long is a piece of string, right? It depends. But I would, on the lower budget side, I would estimate at least 1.5% of your budget, if not 2%. But as you get up into the higher budgets, it's more like 1.5%.
Alexandra, she asked the question we all ask. Why is it so expensive? Do you think the expense just comes because claims? There's a greater risk after the film is out? Is that why that is?
Why is what so expensive?
Like feature film coverage costs more than a whole annual policy for all the short films I want to do. Mm-hmm. Even though it's like basically just a bunch of short films that I do in a short period of time. So what makes it more expensive, you think?
Well, I mean, you can get away with, like if it's like 200,000, I've seen it. We've gotten away with a lot, Oh, I only want general liability. I own all my own equipment. But if you're getting film permits, you're going to have to get the waiver of subrogation. You're going to have to get, if you're getting film permits, Film LA requires auto liability, general liability, and workers' comp. And, if you have a feature that's 250,000, or 200,000, your payroll is going to be probably at least 50 grand. And then the higher the budget, the higher your payroll is. So the higher the exposure and more money.
It's so much. Cam Cole asked, does the cost go down if you're operating a super low budget like $7,000? I'm even going to wonder, can the DICE policy be okay at something that low of budget? Even if it's a feature, like say someone's shooting a 12-day feature, 15-day feature.
Well, I've had clients actually shoot features on a DICE policy before and then tell me after the fact. And I say, you're not supposed to do that. Really? Okay. But if there's, I doubt that a claims adjuster is going to say, well, what was the nature of the film? Was it a doc? Was it
right.
They're more interested in what happened. And another thing, when there's a claim, people go, what do I do? There's a claim. I say, write me a narrative. What happened? Where did it happen? Give me an address. I have to spell these things out for people.
So basically every single detail possible.
Where and when meaning date and time.
So if something occurs, if an incident occurs, then this is the thing where you guys, filmmakers, you need to stop in that moment, stop everything and get it down, get all the information down, take care of that problem. Even if it's like a lamp fell and broke, someone needs to record all of that, because later when you're done filming, you're going to forget details. And it's really important that you have all those details and that you let your insurance company know right away if there is going to be a claim.
Mm-hmm.
So don't wait on that kind of stuff. I love all the questions coming in, guys. I'm going to keep going to them. I do want to ask though, because you mentioned waiver of subrogation, and I've been asked for those for the most random thing, like a 1-day shoot, and it's like a school or a parking lot or something, and I need the waiver of subrogation, and then I email Alan and I go, I'm so sorry, I need that stupid thing again. What is that?
So it basically shifts the so that the insurance company cannot go after a certain entity to recoup costs, basically. So like for Film LA, you get a permit from Film LA, and let's say there's a claim, you can't go after Film LA because they wrote you a permit for this location, or the city of LA, or an entity does not want to take responsibility for your actions.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be subrogated against, where they can recoup in losses from a specific entity. So basically is pushing the onus onto the filmmaker, and they can't just sue everybody because they're upset.
And also, I want to mention when you guys talked about pricing, just so you guys know, I remember needing to get E&O insurance to film on the back lot of Universal. And it was a 1-day low budget thing. And the cheapest E&O was $2,000. That was just E&O to film there, which we decided not to film there because Universal.
And I don't understand why they require E&O to shoot, because you're covering against unauthorized use of a product or something in your content. And especially like when they're doing commercials, it's like there's a whole creative team providing the content. Mm-hmm. You get the boards, you shoot the boards. You have nothing. You're not responsible for that content. You're just putting it together in a production form.
Alexandra's killing me with her, with her. She's said face pink tears. She says, it's not like we have money tree. That's why we're no budget filmmakers. She is, is there any way to hack the system is basically Alexandra's question. Is there any way to hack the system? And I know Alan is the insurance person who wants to do it by the book. You do not have to answer that, but do you have suggestions for those who are like, I don't have money, but I need to be covered?
Yeah. I mean, I have some markets, if it's a very simple shoot and you just need general liability, I can usually knock that out for $430 for general liability for a quick walk and talk. And that's like up to 10 days or so of production.
That's pretty good.
And then, equipment, maybe it's another 150, 200. Usually those policies are less than $1,000, but they're not a comprehensive policy. You are covering usually equipment and general liability, but there's no like extra expense coverage. There's no faulty stock and negative coverage. So yeah, it's you kind of have to balance it out sometimes.
How do you feel about co-productions? I get asked all the time to produce with somebody and that they're doing most of the legwork, but my liability is that I bring the insurance to the table. Mm-hmm. So then is that, I don't know, like, I guess as a Matt, you're producing, but I don't know, is that frowned upon in the insurance?
It happens. What's frowned upon is co-production deals where people are selling their insurance policy. And that is frowned upon. I've got a DICE policy. ABC production company says, hey, we want to use your production insurance. Okay, it'll be like $300-400 a day. Yeah, you can use it. That is frowned upon. And usually there is a co-production question, and that is what they are usually talking about when they're asking about co-production.
But I do think that is a way to quote unquote hack the system, is to get a producing partner who has the insurance mm-hmm. and will help you produce in some way or another.
Yeah.
Is that all of my list? Then I'm gonna get to the people's list. So let's go back up to the top, see what I've missed up here. There were so many questions. I can't believe it's already the half hour. I can't believe our time is already up. So,
Aye,
okay.
aye.
Here, Cam call. This is something that I deal with every year. Like, should I even get insurance? What happens when you get an annual, but for a number of reasons, weren't able to shoot anything that year? It was a waste of expense, other considerations. I kept my insurance through the pandemic, and Alan knows this. Every year I was like, I don't know if I should do it because I ended up always needing it. So it was fine.
Yeah.
And even at one point I was like, I don't have any money for it now and the money's due. And then a project came in that paid for it. So like I've kind of kept it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, there's nothing you can really do as the filmmaker. You can't really, you're not going to get any money back. It kind of is.
Well, it depends if it's a minimum premium policy. No, you're not going to get any money back. But let's say you declared $500,000 in gross production costs and you only shot like $200,000 in gross production costs. You can request an audit. They will almost always audit your workers' comp, which I know, Jen, you probably hate.
Every year, but it's not that big. I mean, it's a form, and so far I've had no problems, knock on wood. So.
But they won't always audit the commercial package or the production package, but you can request them to audit it, and then they'll send you audit forms, and then you fill that out, and they'll go, okay, well, you only shot 200,000. Here's a return premium of X.
Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I have minimum policy, so I'm assuming it doesn't count for me, but I didn't know that was possible. That's great.
Yeah.
David has a great question. How much does it hurt your next policy quote to have claims on your insurance from the previous projects?
It depends. I mean, I've had clients who have had a claim and their rates have not gone up, but if you multiple claims, yes, your rates will go up. But I can't guarantee that one claim is going to or not going to. You know, the one thing insurance people are always taught to say is never say always, never say never. Most of the time, it will be up to the underwriter's discretion.
Yeah, I have a lot of that with Alan, y'all. I'll email him like, okay, so we're thinking about having a horse.
Yeah.
Like, what does my policy cover? What do we need to get? And it's always like, let me ask the underwriter. That's always the question.
I always want to make sure with the underwriter, just in case. Usually there's animal mortality on the policy, or, extra expense in case you hire an animal and the animal gets sick. And then
filmmakers, you got to also remember that, like, you got to be careful with your policy. This is why I'm always emailing Alan. I'm always like, is this covered? Is that covered? Because like stunts may not be covered, or it may be covered, but you have to send in a form to get it approved. Or your horse might be covered, but not the person riding the horse. So there's a lot of little weird things.
And an important thing to note, if you have stunts and you have a workers' comp policy, if you're doing stunts that day, you may need to get a payroll company to cover your crew for that day when there are stunts on that project.
Yeah, insurance is so
because
complicated.
They'll exclude any stunt work on the workers' comp policy.
You guys, we are actually out of time. If there's any last minute questions, please get them in. This has been so informative. I know there's probably a million more questions not asked, but I feel like we've covered so much. Is there anything, Alan, that you think of that like people should know about when it comes to getting insurance or having insurance for their films?
I mean, I would say one of the biggest issues I have is someone will ask for insurance and then they'll buy the insurance and then they'll get to their location and they require like a $5 million excess policy or something like that. And they're like, what? It's like, know the requirements of your locations before you start the process.
Yeah. And I would even go further to say, one, like we said, like SoFi, for instance, they said something like 5 million, but
yeah, you can push back.
They were ultimately okay. It's like, here's what we're doing. And if you talk to them about what you're doing, sometimes like, okay, that's fine because it's not a big crew, big production. And the other side is like, don't use a location you can't afford. So like always ask that before you lock in and get excited and have crew coming there. find this stuff out first.
Yeah.
It looks like no other questions are coming in. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for your time, Alan. Everybody, if you want to reach Alan, you can obviously Google him. He's easy to find. His email is at asisfinancial.com. And I will, I'll put that in like the comments so you guys can find him, or you can always email us and ask us. But great. I guess we are out. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Jen.